Do you know how expensive it is to replace an entry door? This video is how to pre-hang and install your own entry door so you can save yourself a ton of cash. So we picked up this slab door at Lowe's. Slab just refers to that there's no holes drilled in it for hardware, no mortises for hinges. The first thing I do when hanging a door is mortise in the hinges. By doing that, I'm able to judge exactly what the size of the headpiece as well as the threshold should be. So I recommend that you get a hinge mortise template. Some you can buy that do one hinge at a time. Some you can buy that do all three without having to change the setup. This is always going to be my go-to because I set it one time and my hinges are always sure to work out properly. When you use a hinge mortising template, you're going to also need to have a router and have a router template bit. A template routing bit has a bearing that's slightly larger than the cutting surface of the router bit. And that's to ensure that you don't cut into your template. Setting up the router for the proper depth for your hinges is absolutely crucial. And that's because when you mortise in these hinges, you want to make sure that you can just barely feel the top of the hinge protrude or be proud of this edge here. So it's going to be just slightly taller than this edge. To set up the perfect depth, take your router template and place it on top of your router. Then take the hinge and place that on the top of there too. You should feel just a little bit more hinge than you do of this cutting surface here. So this is what I'm talking about right here, okay? You see the router bit, and make sure your router is unplugged, by the way. And when I'm feeling this here, the cutting surface of the router bit is just beneath the top of this hinge, which seems like the perfect amount to set the depth at. So right here where I've set it is absolutely perfect, it seems. To make sure your router base is tightened up and you're ready to set your template. So I'm going to set up the door so that I can route out the hinges on that first, then we'll work on the frame. Since this door is brand new and never had hinges on it, we're able to pick what we want to use on the outside of the house and what we'd like to see inside. And it's going to open here. So it's a left-hand in-swing door, so that means we will put the hinges on the back here. The way that this kind of template is set up, there's a spot that you line up with the door and there's a spot that you line up with the door frame. So it has just a slight offset. So we always work from the top down. This is a Templaco template. You see, like they can get a little expensive, but it's honestly the easiest to use. On the back, you have these red stops. Right now I've got it set up to do 1 3/4 inch thick exterior doors. So you line it up flush with the door and the plywood, okay? And once you've got it there, you're gonna go ahead and make sure it's up against the little red stops and just gonna tap that in and then tap the other one in. Now we can remove the template. Now we have all of our hinge mortises ready to set up for the hinges. But if you'll notice, these mortises are slightly radiused and we want to put on square hinges. So we get our squaring chisel. With one whack of the hammer on this square chisel, we're able to perfectly square off these corners. See this? It came out nice and square, ready for our hinges. When you go to screw in your hinges, make sure that you pre-drill. Whether you use a drill bit or you use something like this, a self-centering drill bit, it's an important step to make sure that you don't crack the wood. When you put the hinges on the door, make sure that you have the side that's closed, pointed towards the top of the door. This would be the bottom. If you remember when we set up our router, we wanted to make sure that the hinge stuck up from the surface of the door just a tiny, tiny bit. Now, the reason for that is that the hinge can fully open and shut without binding on itself. Now we've got a mortise for the hinges on the jamb itself. So since we put the hinges on the left side of the door, we're going to use the left jamb leg. Always start from the top. Since this is an exterior jamb leg, the top is going to be kind of offset. So cut a piece of scrap so that you can set it up exactly how it will be when the door's in it. And then you can take your template and set that where it needs to go. So this is how this will go together eventually with the actual headpiece. So we can set that there and set up our template so that it goes right into, this is where this little piece button comes in handy, because that gives you the offset